Greetings, traveler. I'm SnapJelly, and you thought I was done talking about this fight, didn't you? Ha! Well, I'm just getting started. You think I'm done whining about something after just one video? Hell no. There's plenty of me to whine about. Anyway, honestly, this fight, the Battle of Helm's Deep, as a child, it was my favorite movie fight ever. Like, basically because my sword addiction started at Lord of the Rings, and this one was just so cool. It's still cool in my opinion. But anyway, in my previous video about this topic, I just watched the fight, and basically I just said anything that came up in my mind. And right after making that video, I realized that I already forgotten some things that I wanted to say but didn't say. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about the battle tactics. I'm rambling so much. As you can see in the title, in this video, I just want to say some things about what happened in the fight, if it could have been prevented, how it could have been prevented, stuff like that. You'll get the gist of it as we go along. So I'm excited. You are probably not as excited. Let's just start. Alright, first, just for fun, let's have a look at how defendable the Hornburg actually is, because, well, it's not really defendable. I'm not going to talk too much about this. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm pretty sure that Chad has already or will in the future make a more detailed video about this. But I'm going to have to point out some minor things because basically in this battle, anything that happens to this castle happens because this castle has nothing to prevent it from happening. Let me explain. Alright, first thing, the deeping wall is just that. It's a wall. It doesn't have anything to make the wall more defendable, whereas normal castle walls have things like towers and extending parts to make it more defendable, but the deeping wall doesn't have that. It's just a wall. It does have crenellations, but the crenellations are pretty much useless because the parts that are not crenels, I can't remember what they're called, merlins or something. Anyway, the parts that you're supposed to hide behind are not high enough. Basically, the elves can just reach over, and that's what they do in the battle as well, and this causes the Uruk-hai to be able to shoot them from below. They are open to arrow fire from below, and you see this happening in the fight. So basically, there's no reason for there to be crenellations, because the crenellations are there for the defenders to shoot through when they're not hiding behind the wall, but they're not really hiding behind the wall anyway, because they can reach over. So, yeah, the crenellations are useless. And even if the crenellations weren't useless, there simply aren't nearly enough crenellations here. There could be way more. These are just like occasional arrow slits, more or less. Anyway, as you probably know, the deeping wall is attacked with ladders and the bomb eventually, but ladders for the most part, right? There's nothing to prevent the ladders from being pushed up against these walls. Like a moat, for example, would make it nearly impossible for infantry to move ladders to the wall. But even if you couldn't get enough water down here to make a moat, then there are still other ways to make it a lot harder for infantry to move up against the wall. For example, you can make an incredibly steep hill and build the wall on top of that. This way the infantry would have to climb up a super steep hill first. In order to get the ladder, they have to take the ladder up there and put the ladder up in such a way that it makes it climbable for you all the way while climbing a super steep hill. It would just make it incredibly difficult. But the deeping wall has none of that. It's just a wall. Now moving on, the main gate gets rammed and, whoa, no, wait, actually, hold on, something else first. This side entrance kind of thing, it's stupid. I don't get it. Like, what's the point with this side entrance? What's the point of having a side entrance that you would have to leap several meters in order to get to the main road? Like, it's not connected. What's the point of that? There's probably some in-lore explanation that I don't know, but like frickin' Aragorn apparently knew of it because Theoden didn't tell him to go there. He just went like on his own. So he knew that it was there, and then, well, there's a little path that's about 1 man wide, and then you have to jump in order to get to the main road, and there's no other way to go. What's the point of this? I don't get it. Well, it makes for a cool movie moment, but other than that, I don't really see it. Okay, back to the main gate. The main gate gets rammed. Why does it get rammed? Because there's nothing to prevent it from getting rammed. Something like a drawbridge, for example. A drawbridge, it's pretty hard to ram a gate if there's nothing to walk on. So if you have a drawbridge that you can pull up, then there's nothing to walk on. So you can't actually ram the gate. It will make it pretty difficult to ram the gate, but it's not there. Also, if you've ever been to a castle and you've passed through the gatehouse, if you paid close attention, then you would have noticed that you probably didn't pass through one gate, but you passed through two gates. There tends to be one gate on the outside and one gate on the inside of the gatehouse. With Helm's Deep, this is not the case though. After this single gate gets broken down, the Uruk-hai rush in, and that's the end of the battle. This is not that smart. There's a reason why castles tend to have two gates next to each other in the gatehouse. Thing is, if the first gate gets rammed, you would still have to ram the second gate. You would have to move your battering ram into this funnel essentially, which would have arrow slits and all that on the sides, like just bunch of slits that you can shoot arrows through and poke spears through and all that. You would basically walk into a giant reverse pincushion, and you would have to walk in there and ram the second gate. So, woo-ha, we rammed the first gate, now we have to do all of that again, and now we're being fucking poked at from all the sides. It's incredibly difficult, and arguably, you could make the argument that eventually the funnel would just get full of bodies and it would become progressively harder to actually ram that gate successfully. Helm's Deep does have this kind of funnel formation, but just a single gate, which is just bad. Talking about just a single gate, Helm's Deep also has a second floor, which doesn't have an extra gate, and well, that's also just stupid. The reason why castles have multiple layers is to make it more defendable. You pass the first gate, you break through the first layer of defenses, then all the defending troops can move back to the second level, and there would be another gate there, so the attackers would have to go through all the same shit again. They've lost hundreds of troops just trying to get through this first gate, and woohoo, there's a second gate. But Helm's Deep does have a second level, but there's no second gate. So that's just pointless. Another thing is that Aragorn, after the Deeping Wall is fallen, Aragorn runs up this stairs right here. I'm guessing that there's also a door like on the Deeping Wall itself, but they never really show that very well. But anyway, Aragorn runs up these stairs, and then after that they cut away from the Deeping Wall at all, and they just focus on the main gate and nothing else. So I assume that there's another gate here between the stairs, like at the top of the stairs that Aragorn runs up to. Because if not, then, yeah, that would be quite dumb. I mean, if there is a gate, then I assume that the Uruk-hai just kind of ignore it and don't try to break through it, because they just start focusing on the main gate and nothing else is shown. But if there's not a gate, then that would be quite dumb as well, because that means that after the Deeping Wall falls, the entire fortress falls, basically. You can just walk straight through. Yeah, that's a giant flaw. That's a huge flaw, actually, because honestly, the Deeping Wall as it is, it would not be very hard to be taken, even without bombs. With just ladders, I feel like it could be taken fairly easily. Because if you focus your troops around here, eventually you would take this portion, you could walk down the stairs and quite easily cut off and surround quite a huge portion of your opponent's troops, of the defender's troops, and surround them and take them out quite easily. Because the Deeping Wall is so long, it stretches the defending troops out quite thin. And well, in this case, in the case of the movie at least, Theoden didn't even have enough troops to cover all of the Deeping Wall if the elves hadn't showed up. So yeah, overall, Helm's Deep is not that defendable. But now let's go to what this video was actually supposed to be about. The battle tactics. The Uruk-hai decide to charge a huge fortress with a huge force of pikemen. Honestly, it's just pikemen. It's like the entire army is made up out of pikemen. Here in the front row, there's pikemen. In the back, there's pikemen. They're all pikemen. Why would you need so much pikemen when you're charging a castle? You don't. Actually, the first thing they do is they move up with these ladders, and you can't move your pike up a ladder. And if you could, there would be no point, because what are you gonna do with a pike at the top of a wall? So basically, all the Uruk-hai, as soon as they reach the ladders, as soon as they reach the castle, they would have to drop their pikes on the floor and climb up with their swords in hand. So down here at the base, there would just be a huge pile of unused pikes that the Uruk-hai would have to walk over in order to get to the ladders, because you would have to drop your pike. There's nothing else to do with it. It would make sense for the Uruk-hai to have some pikemen though, because they are in Rohan, and the Rohan are of course notorious for their cavalry. There's quite a large chance for them to be flanked or charged by supporting cavalry at some point in the battle. So it's logical for the Uruk-hai to have some pikemen at the back or at the flanks of their army to prevent that from happening. But they don't need pikes all the way through, and they definitely don't need pikemen all the way at the front. They would need very large shields at the front. They would benefit from that a lot more. Second thing is the Uruk-hai don't walk out of the way for the bombs. I'm assuming that they knew the bomb was gonna go off. And also, they only have one Uruk-hai that lights the torch. Like, you don't know what was supposed to happen should this Uruk-hai, like, die, like, from a stray arrow in the eye or some shit. Like, was some other Uruk-hai just there to take up the torch and light the bombs? Like, it would be more logical, more safe to just have a small group of kamikaze Uruk-hai carrying torches, all moving towards the bombs in order to make sure they're ignited, whilst all the others kind of just move out of the way to limit the casualties the most. Alright, of course, a lot of Uruk-hai would die from the falling rocks, but, you know, you can't predict that. You can't predict where they fall. You can't prevent that either. But at least you don't want to stand right next to the explosion. Except if you're, of course, the kamikaze one, because then it's your job. I already pointed this out in my previous video, but the Uruk-hai are smart enough to create a testudo formation, but not smart enough to create a testudo formation that actually covers their flanks, their sides. Even though their armor is weak under the armpit, they are lifting their arms. Whilst they have these huge shields, they don't cover their sides. That's like half smart. They are smart enough to create the formation, but not smart enough to defend the weakest portion of their bodies. Alright, now eventually the wall is boomed and the Uruk-hai march in. I want to say something about this. Charge. Why charge exactly? The arrows seem to do their job quite well. I mean, you obviously couldn't stop all the Uruk-hai continuously with arrows, but why stop shooting arrows? You see, here's a thing that would make more sense, considering this situation. As soon as the wall is broken through, of course the Uruk-hai would start pouring in. You would prevent them, if possible, from pouring in as much as they did in the movie. In the movie, it just turned into an all-out battle, but you would want to try and keep them into that funnel where they're vulnerable, while you have them surrounded, basically. If you can keep the incoming force small and you can surround them with your troops, you have a great advantage there, and a lot of elves can stay back and actually keep continuously shooting arrows through the funnel, through the smallest part, because it's a very small part that the Uruk-hai have to walk through, of course, where the bodies would again pile up, and eventually it would become so hard for the Uruk-hai to move over them, arguably even impossible to move over the giant pile of bodies, because it's not comfortable to walk over bodies. So it would become progressively harder for the Uruk-hai to go in through this funnel. But they don't do that. They charge, like all the elves charge simultaneously, and it just becomes a huge all-out clash. The Uruk-hai, they just kind of, they go in through this very small hole, which is honestly just small if you look at it closely. Like maybe two could stand next to each other through that hole, and they just pour in at amazing speed. It's incredible. Yeah, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Now there's just one more thing that I want to mention. One thing. They're almost breaking down the gate, and Aragorn and Gimli decide to go through the side entrance, and they jump and they do this and da-da-da-da-da-da, and they fight everybody, and oh, everything's happy. And then this happens.
Gimli! Aragorn! Get out of there!
Get out of there. How? How exactly? How? Okay, this is what I don't get. Because, you know, I doubt that they planned ahead, but they knew that they would have to go out, right? They didn't go up to tell Legolas, hey, get a rope, because that's what happened. Legolas somehow magically knew that they were down there, and he got a rope magically that's long enough to get Aragorn and Gimli out there, which is, well, like, what if Legolas would have been busy at that point? What would have happened? Get out of there. How? Where would they go? Are they just gonna jump back? Come on. This doesn't make any sense. Alright, there's plenty more that I could be nitpicking about this fight, but I think that does it for now. So that was it, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you stuck around this long, you might as well subscribe. Also follow me on social media. Links are in the description below. And thank you for joining my quest, and I hope you'll join me in the next one. Bye, guys.